Hey guys, my name is Devontae and I sacrificed my time so you don't have to. I'm going to try to get in and get out because I have to get ready for work later on today. Well, actually within the next hour or so. And I'm gone for the rest of the day. But I really want to talk about this because I feel this is something that's very, very important. So if you don't know, personally speaking, just to kind of be a little bit more anecdotal about this, so you guys know that I'm not being bad faith or I have any type of agenda going into this, I'm a massive, massive, massive Bryan Danielson mark. Have been for the better part of nearly, I want to say, the first match I seen of Bryan Danielson would have probably been on Livewire. I don't know if, or LimeWire. I don't know if you guys remember that website back in like the early to mid 2000s. That was like my go-to to see all my professional wrestling outside of DVDs. My first match that I seen for Bryan Danielson was probably the Kenta match, if I remember correctly, back in ROH. I want to say like in 2006, most likely. That was my first time seeing Bryan Danielson, and around that time is when I became a massive mark for like technical wrestling. And you know, Benoit was alive at that point still. I was watching a shit ton of him, William Regal. I remember I went back to go watch the Bryan Pillman Memorial match. Just to kind of give a little bit of context as far as how long I've been following Daniel Bryan. It's been nearly 20 years now. And ever since then, it's very, very, very rare. I can't even tell you off the top of my head a bad Bryan Danielson match. He is one of the best wrestlers of all time. And in ring, and from my money, probably you can make a hard argument, even more so than a Benoit, even more so than an Angle, dare I say even more so than a Bret Hart. From a scientific standpoint, Mac technician wise, you can make a strong argument that Bryan Danielson is the greatest wrestler of all time from an in-ring perspective, scientifically speaking, and just overall speaking, honestly. Just to kind of layer it on a little tiny bit, he's been I can't even tell you, the dude probably more so than any wrestler today has the most injuries I've ever seen sustained by a professional wrestler. I don't think there's a body part on Bryan Danielson's body that he hasn't broken, bruised, or flat out just ruptured or injured. This dude is an absolute maniac. He puts his body on the line in order to get whatever he needs to get over. And the only person I could think of, and you know, people may make the comparisons from an in-ring perspective, but I look at it more so from a dedication standpoint. The only people who I can think of that even comes close to Bryan Danielson's dedication in regards to putting his body on the line in order to get someone over, help get someone over, or get the match over is probably Angle or Benoit. Those are like the only two. That's why I appreciate a Bryan Danielson. But the time has come. The time has definitely come. I appreciate Bryan Danielson. Again, still to this very day, probably my favorite wrestler of the entire 2010s, and it's not really close. And today, maybe right next to, maybe a little bit below Walter nowadays, because Bryan Danielson, he is still a great performer, but he's not nearly the same level performer as he was about 10 years ago, which no one would be, you know, closing in on their mid-40s. So I probably put Walter over him a little bit today from a current roster standpoint, but he is still up there, and overall he is still in my top 10 favorite wrestlers of all time. I can never hate a Bryan Danielson match. But I leave this off because with all the stuff that I'm layering on right now, it has come to, how do I put this? I want to say I've come to fruition, but it's come to a point, I'll say that, where Bryan Danielson has suffered yet another injury. And we're talking about maybe his fourth, maybe his fifth injury in his 40s. Mind you, Dragon has to be like, how old is Dragon right now? Probably like 42, I'm assuming. His birthday's in May, right? I think he was born in 81. Yeah, he's got to be like 42 years old right about now. Check out this article real quick, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of context and, you know, give you guys the entire story. The link is down in the description box below. Bryan Danielson out until 2024 with broken orbital bone. Bryan Danielson suffered an apparent injury during this week's episode of AEW Dynamite and will be sidelined until next year. An announcement tonight on AEW Collision, well, obviously the Collision that just passed. Claudio Castagnoli said that Danielson suffered a broken orbital bone. As a result, Danielson would be out of action for the foreseeable future. The injury seems to have come on Wednesday's episode of AEW Dynamite. Danielson took an orange punch from Orange Cassidy and then a Rainmaker from Kazuchika Okada. Bryan Danielson was holding his face at the end of the match. He was attended to by an AEW official as the episode of Dynamite ended. According to Tony Schiavone, who was on commentary for Collision, Danielson will require surgery. This will keep him out for the rest of the year as a result. Let's see, PW Insider reports that AEW sources have confirmed that Bryan Danielson's injury is not part of a storyline. It is not a part of a storyline. Again, you guys will see the link down in the description box below. Now, we're talking about Bryan Danielson, who just came off the injury list, not even what, I want to say maybe 2 months ago, and that's being generous. It could have been a month ago, honestly. I mean, when was that match he had with Ricky Starks? When was that? I don't think that was at, I can't remember what show that was at. No, it wasn't at Wrestle Dream. Wrestle Dream was the Zack Sabre Jr. match. They have so many shows this year that I can't even keep up with it. Ironically, coming from the 4-show freaking organization, right? But yeah, he had that match with what's his name? Oh, was it at All In? I think it was at All In, right? Whatever though. He had that match with Ricky Starks as a return because of the whole CM Punk drama, and he came off the injured reserve list when he messed up his arm in the first Okada match back at what's the name of that show again? You know, the Forbidden Door. There you go. How many injuries can one person take before it really starts to affect their quality of life? The amount of stories I heard from someone, for an example, like a Mick Foley, and the pain that he has to go through every single day, just walking nowadays for a Mick Foley is complete and utter torture. It is insane to me to see someone go through so much turmoil for the sport that they love. I will give you that, but at what cost when it comes to your quality of life? See, my thing is, maybe I wouldn't, and honestly, I still have a problem with this because I don't want to see anyone cripple themselves doing professional wrestling after pretty much gaining the notoriety as being a GOAT already. Like Bryan Danielson, no matter what you want to look, I even put him on 100 greatest wrestlers of all time. Was relatively low in comparison to everybody else, but relatively high in comparison to the previous generation and even the current generation. Make no mistake about it, Bryan Danielson is and forever will go down as one of the greatest professional wrestlers that have ever entered this business, without a shadow of a doubt. You have cemented yourself as, by far, one of the greatest wrestlers in WWE history. You have cemented yourself as top tier in AEW and very influential, not just to the wrestlers, but to that company's business model, just going off of the fact that it's people like Bryan Danielson as to why AEW is even a thing, because he put ROH on the map, which is, you know, subsequently just, what would you say, like, I wouldn't say like a separation or a doppelganger, but let's just say if ROH was pregnant, it gave birth to AEW. Let's just put it that way, right? And from an indie wrestling standpoint, you can make an argument that Bryan Danielson is the greatest indie wrestler of all time. That's a very, very strong case and a very, very strong argument. I'm glazing the shit out of Bryan Danielson right now because I'm putting him over, because I'm saying all these things to make note of the fact that there is literally nothing else to prove. There's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to prove. You already proven that you can still go in the ring. You've already proven that you literally accomplished everything that you wanted to accomplish. Hell, you even did what CM Punk couldn't do, and that's actually main event WrestleMania. As a matter of fact, when you truly think about it, I'm going back right now. I'm thinking about it. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, considering Roman Reigns, I think, has literally main evented every WrestleMania outside of the 2021 because of COVID. And then when you go to 2013, that would have been John Cena going back as far as the main event is considered. I could be wrong, but, and I don't count Seth Rollins' cash in, nor do I count Drew McIntyre because he wrestled for TNA. I'm talking about a true indie talent, a true quote unquote indie darling. I think Bryan Danielson is the only indie wrestler to have ever main evented WrestleMania. I think so. I could be wrong about that, but I think Bryan Danielson is the only indie wrestler. I mean, started off in the indies, made his name in the indies, wrestled all over the world in the indies, and then came to WWE. I think he's the only one to ever main event WrestleMania. And not only he did it twice. It wasn't just once. Danielson did it twice. There's, like, what is there left to do? There was literally, he has a catalog so goddamn extensive. Like, people can literally look at that work of his and just sit there and just watch that for the rest of the eternity. That there's nothing else to do. And I get it. He loves it. He doesn't want to give it up. But even then, I think Bryan Danielson actually talked about the fact that he has an end time. He has an end date. He even said that, hey man, I don't want to be a full-time wrestler next year. I think he said, if I'm not mistaken, I don't mind speaking verbatim here, but like I think he said something along the lines like this was just a couple of weeks ago when he talked about this, when he said that he didn't want to be a full-time wrestler anymore because he wants to spend time with his kids. He's in his 40s. How old is Birdie right now? Birdie's got to be like, oh my God, like probably 7, turning 8. I gotta presume like either she's turning 7 or she's getting ready to turn 8. And he has a little boy too, if I'm not mistaken. Like, you have a full-on family, my dude. What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? I gotta believe, I mean, especially given the kind of lifestyle Bryan Danielson lives, not only is he rich, but he's frugal as absolute shit. And his wife's frugal. They're hippies. Like, there's nothing more to do, bro. There's nothing more to do. Like, now you have a broken orbital bone. I say personally, this is just my personal opinion, end your career with AEW if you want to. I personally think, this is just my personal opinion, I think he should go out on his back on an ROH show, really build that card up super duper 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 strong, call it a night of appreciation, whatever you want to call it, and let Bryan Danielson retire on ROH. That's just my perspective. People go, oh, no one watches ROH. Well, make it a point. Make it a point to replace AEW. I know you could probably talk to one of these cats on, you know, your cable television or whatever the case may be. Make it a point to let ROH replace a Dynamite for one night. Or hell, build up a very, very strong ROH card and promote the ever-loving shit out of it. You don't really have to do that much promotion if you put Bryan Danielson on the card. I think it would draw about as much as your average AEW show if Danielson's on the ROH card at the very least. And let Danielson retire in ROH. The place where he got his stomping grounds, right? The place that he got started. I can't think of a better way to really end his career. Let him retire in ROH. And personally speaking, I don't think there's any problems with him. I think he's okay from a health perspective, right? I mean, I know he's doing commentary right now, but I see let him end it with one of his greatest rivals. Nigel McGuinness is sitting right there on commentary. Let Bryan Danielson have a retirement match with Nigel McGuinness on an ROH show. Let it main event, give them like 30 to 45 minutes, a classic Bryan Danielson match, and let him bow out that way. Do it next year. That's personally what I would do. And then he can come out and nobody watched it or anything like that, which I highly doubt because it is Bryan Danielson's retirement match. Go ahead and let him come out for AEW Dynamite and let him formally retire in front of the audience after his match at ROH, whatever show. That's it. Do that. Get this over with. This is not me saying like, oh, Yellow has to be shot in the head. It's not saying that. But euthanasia, I think it's appropriate right about now. Bryan Danielson is hurting. The last thing I want him to be is in a position like Mick Foley. Another one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Another guy who gave his life to the business. Literally gave his life, gave his body, gave his mind to the business. And he'll never be the same again. There are wrestlers who have wrestled Bryan Danielson's style who is no longer here anymore. And mind you, Danielson, I'm pretty sure, I can't see Bryan, I could be wrong obviously, but I can't see Bryan Danielson doing this. Bryan Danielson doesn't use any type of drugs. Bryan Danielson doesn't use any type of thing to mask the pain of whatever he's going through at the moment, unless I'm pretty sure given by his doctor. And I'm pretty sure he takes the appropriate dosage given to him by his doctor. Never really took Danielson Dragon to be an addict or anything like that. Unlike a Kurt Angle, for an example, with all due respect. He's going through just about as much pain as those guys. He has had multiple concussions. He retired based off concussion. He has had neck injuries, took him out for an entire year. He has had spine injuries. He has had literally losing his feelings in his hand, you know, broken arms. Literally, this everything this guy has been through. He's done all this, and mind you, I haven't been given any evidence to suggest otherwise. He hasn't taken any drugs that the guys who have been through the same kind of pain he's been through, maybe even less. He hasn't taken any drugs to put himself into a position where he can mask the pain. He's just been eating this shit. And it's been going on for nearly, at this point, 25 years. It's over, man. You've done everything you've done everything you needed to do. And now you're injured again. Again, quality life comes into question at a certain point. But I'm going to let you guys discuss this down in the comment section below. I just really wanted to talk about this because, honestly, Bryan Danielson legitimately is legit one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. And I don't want to see him go out the way of an Eddie Guerrero, for an example, which obviously Eddie was more related to drug issues. But I mean, as far as putting his body through so much that he had to take the drugs to put himself into that position. A Chris Benoit, obviously. Concussion after concussion after concussion can do so much to the human brain. I don't want to see him go out like Mick Foley, barely being able to walk because of what he did to his body to sacrifice to the business for yours and mine's entertainment. I don't want to see him have a terrible quality of life, especially being a father of very, very young kids. I don't even think his 10-year marriage, I think it's coming up, but I don't think his 10-year anniversary with Brie has even came up yet. He has a very, very young family, and he himself is very, very young. There's no reason to go through this anymore. I love Dragon, but we have all his matches to go back and watch if we need our fix. 25 years of work. It's time for him to hang him up. Put the boots in the middle of the ring and go live your life. A good quality of life. And as I even say, you can't even still stay backstage and help out the wrestlers backstage and be a producer. Again, highly influential talent. People respect and love Bryan. He'll have a place in AEW forever. You'll be okay. Hang up the boots. Not for our sake, but for your sake. As always, my name is Devontae, and I'll be catching you guys later. Deuces, P. Ice.